The thing to notice about the progressive era is that there was a lot of national discussion at that time about these challenges. That's what Teddy Roosevelt especially was doing, but a lot of other people too at the national level. Pardon me, but most of the actual policy innovations that came to fix that problem did not come from Washington. That national conversation gave oxygen to local reformers in places all around America. And so the innovations in that time came from, you know, Galveston and Toledo and the Wyoming territories and Iowa, Kansas. The American high school, God did not invent American high schools. High schools were invented by small towns in Iowa and Kansas and the Midwest in this period so that kids, with the idea that these are all our kids, we're all going to be better off if we give all of them a secondary education, free secondary education. That turned out, and then the idea spread across America, that turned out to be the best public policy decision America has ever taken. Because that massive investment in giving a free a high school education to everybody in America, it raised the level of what economists call human capital in America and accounts for almost all of our growth in the 20th century. Mm-hmm. And at the same time, it leveled the playing field because everybody got the... Now, it might have been a little bit of a hard sell to say to the rich farmer or banker or lawyer in town, your kids are already off to Chicago, but you should pay so that these other poor kids in town get a free secondary education. But that's effectively what happened. And it happened, I think, because it happened in the places in which people did think of everybody's kid as they're all our kids. We're all going to be better off. And that's true today. This is not altruism. The whole country would be better off economically, politically, socially, morally, if we could begin to invest more in these kids.
Let's start with economically. What would it do to our economy?
Well, you can phrase it positively or negatively. The best cost estimates are that it cuts, not investing in poor kids costs us about 4% of GDP a year. A big chunk of that is, you might think, a big chunk of that is the criminal justice system. If we don't invest in poor kids, that's going to raise the number of kids that get involved in the criminal justice system. We're going to have to pay for prisons and all that. Actually, that's not the biggest thing. Welfare payments to these kids are that's not a major part of the cost. Bigger are the health of these kids because they're much less healthy, and poor kids are now much more obese than rich kids, and they're getting more obese faster, so they're going to get more diabetes, and they're going to get sicker longer, and somebody's going to have to pay for that, right? And that turns out to cut probably a percent and a half out of our GDP each year. That just the health of these poor kids. But the other really important part of it is the lost opportunity, the workforce side of this. We're writing off 23 million potential workers every year. Mary Sue is not in a position to be a productive worker, and that means they're not, through no fault of her own, she's not going to be contributing to the. If you have a very simple-minded maker-taker view of the world, you say, well, she's going to be a taker. But Mary Sue's not responsible for that. Maybe her parents screwed up, but Mary Sue didn't. And this is the most important point I want to say. Helping Mary Sue won't hurt my Miriam, my own granddaughter. It'll help my granddaughter. My granddaughter will be better off. I don't just mean morally, I mean economically, materially better off if we also invest in other people's kids. This is not a zero-sum game. It's a positive-sum game.
And you said 4% something, but what's that, 500 billion a year or something?
Yeah, over the lifetimes of these kids, the best estimate is $5 trillion. So we're talking, $1 trillion here, $1 trillion there.
And you also gave a comparison, beds up, as Berkson said. You also gave a comparison, which I'd love you to try to spin out, because I'm not sure I can remember it exactly, that if Atlanta had the same sort of equality of opportunity that Salt Lake City had, the economy of Atlanta would be what?
11% bigger.
And that's just an economic fact, right?
Yeah, this comes from the Federal Reserve Board in Boston, the economists at the Federal Reserve Board. They've calculated you know, the growth rate of different parts of America. There are other things that affect the growth rate, of course, of given metropolitan areas. But holding all those other things constant, and then you can ask, well, okay, why is Atlanta so low and why is Salt Lake City so high? And that's another discussion. But the fact of the matter is, that makes a big difference. Everybody in Atlanta would be better. Everybody would be better off if they just paid a little more attention to the poor kids.